I cannot keep doing this alone. I cannot. This is not a future. This is just pots. I am doing this because I love you. You will understand one day. You will not struggle the way I struggled. You are making pots. That is all she sees.
The axe forgets. But the tree remembers. That is what the elders of Ugoma used to say when someone tried to bury a wrong under the weight of time. They believed that the land itself kept records, that the soil absorbed every injustice, every silent tear, every name spoken in contempt, and that one day, without warning, the earth would give back exactly what had been planted in it. This is a story about what was planted in one girl's life and what grew from it. Sit down well. This one is not for people in a hurry. In the hills of Enugu State, where the morning fog sits low over red earth and the smell of burning firewood mixes with damp grass, there was a small village called Ugoma. Not a poor village, not a rich one, the kind of place where people had just enough to survive and just enough pride to pretend they had more. The kind of place where your grandmother's reputation followed you to the market, where the way you greeted an elder in the morning determined how people spoke about your family by evening in that village. In a compound with a cracked cement wall and a small garden of pepper and uziza, lived a woman named Chisom Eze. Everyone called her Mama Chisom. She was a widow, had been one for 7 years ever since her husband Chukudi fell from a palm tree and never stood up again. After that, she raised her children alone, 3 of them Amara, the eldest, then Kelachi, the boy, then little Adaeze, who still had gaps in her teeth. Mama Chisom was not a bad woman. This is important to understand. Before we go further, she was not cruel. She did not have hate in her heart. What she had was fear. And in Ugoma, fear wore the same clothes as wisdom. Fear told you to bow your head. Fear told you to accept what was offered before it was taken. Fear told you that a woman alone, with 3 children and a cracked compound wall, could not afford to make enemies of powerful men. And so when Chief Emeka Obi came asking, Mama Chisom listened, but we are getting ahead of the story. Let us go back to the beginning. Let us start with Amara. Amara Eze was 19 years old, and her hands were never clean, not because she was dirty, because she worked with clay every single day of her life. From the time she was 8 years old, she would follow her grandmother to the back of the compound where the soil was darkest and smoothest, and she would watch the old woman's fingers move across wet clay with a patience that looked like prayer. Her grandmother Mama Ingu had learnt pottery from her own mother, who had learnt it from hers. A lineage of women whose hands had shaped water pots and cooking vessels and ceremonial bowls for as far back as anyone in Ugoma could remember. When Mamanu died, she left Amara her tools and her knowledge. And Amara received both like sacred things. But by the time she was 15, Amara was making pieces that the village women preferred over anything sold at the Ogbete market. Her water pots didn't crack in the sun. Her cooking vessels held heat evenly, but it was her decorative work that made people stop walking and stare. She had developed a style entirely. Her own geometric patterns pressed into the clay before firing, inspired by the fabric her grandmother used to wear, inspired by the shapes she saw in ant hills and in the wings of certain beetles, inspired by things she could not name but could feel people came from 3 villages away to buy Amara's work. She kept every naira in a biscuit tin under her sleeping mat. She was saving for something she had not yet told her mother. A small shop, a kiln that could fire larger pieces, maybe if the savings held a trip to Abuja to see what prices her work could fetch in the city. Her best friend Ngozi used to sit with her in the evenings while she worked, watching the clay take shape under Amara's fingers and say, "You know, this thing you do is not normal. Abai like the way you see something in clay that is not there yet, and then you put it there that is a gift from somewhere serious." Amara would laugh and say she was just copying her grandmother. But Ngozi had known Amara since they were 4 years old, and she knew that was not true. What Amara had went beyond copying. It was something original, something that belonged only to her. This is what makes what happened next so painful, because the thing that was taken from Amara was not just her freedom, it was her future. It was that biscuit tin. It was that unnamed thing she could see in clay before anyone else could see it. Chief Emeka Obi was 51 years old and owned 3 filling stations, a block-making company, and a large house on the better side of Enugu. He was not a man people refused openly. When he walked into a room, conversations shifted. When he spoke at village meetings, other men nodded before he had finished his sentences. He had one wife, already a quiet woman from Anambra, who attended church every Sunday and had learned over the years to make herself invisible in her own home. He was, by the standards of Ugoma, a very big man. He had seen Amara at the AK market, watched her negotiate the price of her pottery with a calm directness that most grown men in the village did not possess. He had heard people talk about her work, and somewhere between admiration and something more calculated, he had decided he wanted her in his household. He sent his kinsman to Mama Chisom with kola nuts and palm wine and words, wrapped carefully in the language of respect and tradition. Mama Chisom listened. She served them food. She smiled. She said she would think about it that night. She could not sleep. The compound needed repairs. Kelechi's school fees were 3 terms behind. Adaize had been sick twice that year. And the medicine was expensive. The widow's portion of the family land was still being disputed by Chukwudi's elder brother, who smiled at her in public and worked against her in private. Mama Chisom was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your bones. After years of fighting alone, Chief Emeka was offering a bride price that would solve every immediate problem he was offering connection. Protection, the end of certain conversations that happened when her back was turned. He was offering in the language that Ugoma understood. A solution, and Amara was the price. Now here is the part that cuts deepest. The parts that Ngozi would still talk about years later. When she told this story, Mama Chisom did not make this decision carelessly. She made it with love. That is the unbearable truth. She looked at the cracked wall and the medicine bills and Kelechi's unworn school shoes. And she told herself she was doing what a good mother does. She was securing the family. She was giving Amara a life of comfort. Instead of struggle, she was being practical in the way that women, who have been alone too long, learn to be practical, confusing sacrifice with love, confusing silence with safety. She went to Amara on a Tuesday morning. While the others were still sleeping, she sat on the edge of her daughter's mat, and she said very quietly, "Chief Emeka has asked for you." "I have agreed." Amara did not speak immediately. She lay still for a moment, and the only sound was the rooster in the neighbor's compound, beginning to make noise about the sunrise. Then she said, "Mama, I am not going." Mama Chisom's voice tightened Amara. "He's a man of means. You will not struggle the way I struggled." "I am not struggling." Amara said, "I am building something. You are making pots." The way she said it, "My people." The way those 3 words came out flat and final, as if 19 years of watching her daughter work had taught her nothing. You are making pots, as if everything Amara had created, every piece, every market, every saved naira, every woman who walked 2 villages to buy her work, as if all of it collapsed into something small and dismissible. You are making pots. Amara sat up slowly. She looked at her mother. She said, "Mama, I have savings. I have a plan. I do not need a man to rescue me from a life I am not drowning." Mama Chisom stood up. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "He's coming with his family at the end of the month. You will be ready." She walked out of the room. Amara sat on her mat for a long time after that, her hands resting in her lap, and the hands that were never fully clean, and she understood something then that she had not understood before. A cage does not have to be made of iron. It can be made of love. It can be made of fear. It can be made of a mother sitting on the edge of your mat in the early morning, with wet eyes and a voice that has already decided. She went to find Ngozi. She told her everything. Ngozi sat on the low fence, outside her mother's compound, and listened without speaking until Amara was done. Then she said, "So what are you going to do?" Amara did not answer right away. She looked at the red earth of the path, at the line of women walking to the morning market with baskets on their heads. At the hills in the distance where the fog was still burning off, she said, "I don't know yet, but I know I am not going to disappear quietly." Here is what the village saw from the outside. A young woman being given in marriage to a prosperous man tradition being followed. A struggling family, receiving help Chief Emeka, arriving with his people, the palm wine, the kola nut. The envelope that made Mama Chisom's hands tremble when she held it here is what only Ngozi saw Amara the night before the visit. Wrapping every piece of her best pottery carefully in old cloth and hiding them under Ngozi's bed. Amara pressing the biscuit tin into Ngozi's hands and saying, "Keep this for me. If anything happens, if I have to leave in a hurry, this is what I will need." Ngozi holding the tin and not asking questions, because that is what a real friend does. She holds the thing you cannot afford to lose, and she asks no questions. The visit happened. The agreement was formalized in the language of Ugoma. Everything was done correctly. Mama Chisom served food and smiled. Chief Emeka was gracious and loud in the way. Powerful men are loud. His kinsmen made jokes. The neighbors came to watch through the fence. Amara sat through all of it with a face so still that Ngozi, watching from a distance, felt something cold move through her, because Ngozi had known Amara for 15 years, and she had never seen that face before. It was not the face of someone who had accepted something. It was the face of someone who was waiting. The weeks that followed were strange and slow. Chief Emeka sent gifts. Mama Chisom began making plans for the wedding. Kelechi's school fees were paid. The compound wall was repaired by a man Chief Emeka sent without being asked. And the neighbors made sounds of admiration. Little Adeze got new shoes. The family was by visible measures doing better. And Amara moved through all of it. Like a woman walking through a room, she had already memorized, touching nothing, disturbing nothing, leaving no impression on any surface. She cooked when she was supposed to cook. She greeted when she was supposed to greet. She answered when she was spoken to, but she had stopped making pottery. This is the detail that nobody in the village thought to notice. Amara's hands, which had never been still in her adult life, were suddenly still the tools her grandmother had left her, sat in the corner of the room. The clay dried out the biscuit tin was at Ngozi's house. The girl who had always been building something was at Ngozi's house. For the first time, completely motionless. Only Mama Chisom noticed, and she told herself it was adjustment. She told herself Amara would come around. She told herself this was normal, that all young women feel this way before a big change, that the stillness was temporary, that love would come after. This is the dramatic irony. The elders speak about when they say the eye can see everything except itself. Mama Chisom saw the stillness and called it peace. Anyone watching from outside, I would have recognized it immediately for what it was. A gathering the way a storm gathers one Thursday morning. 3 weeks before the wedding day, Tamara was not in her bed. She was not in the compound. She was not at the market. She was not at Ngozi's house. Though Ngozi's mother said she had come by the evening before and collected something, she was not in Ugoma at all. Mama Chisom stood in the middle of her repaired compound, and the sound that came out of her was not a scream. It was quieter than that, the kind of sound that only comes when something you were holding very tightly is suddenly not there anymore. Kelechi ran out. Little Adaez began to cry without fully knowing why. Chief Emeka was informed. His face went through several expressions before settling on one that had nothing to do with grief, and everything to do with the particular anger of a man who had paid for something and been denied it. The village naturally had opinions. She has brought shame on her family. That girl was always too proud. What kind of daughter does that to a mother who sacrificed everything? Chief Emeka is a good man. She doesn't know what she has lost. Ngozi sat in her mother's compound and said nothing to anyone, because she knew she had stood at the junction at 5 in the morning and watched Amara climb into a commercial bus heading north toward Abuja. with a cloth bag on her back and a tin under her arm, and the particular posture of someone who has made a decision. They are completely at peace with. Ngozi had held her friend for a long time at that junction. No words. Then she had stepped back and watched the bus pull away, and had stood there until the tail lights disappeared into the pre-dawn dark. She had gone home and cried quietly into her pillow, not for Amara, for everything Amara had been forced to leave behind. Now, my people, if you think Amara arrived in Abuja and immediately found her feet, please understand that Abuja does not care about your plans. Abuja is a city of wide roads and glass buildings and security gates, and the particular coldness of a place where everyone is from somewhere else, and therefore no one is responsible for anyone else. Amara had the name of a woman written on a small piece of paper, a woman who sold artisan crafts from a small shop in Wus that had been mentioned once in a radio program. Amara had heard 2 years ago and never forgotten. That is all she had, that, and her tin of savings and her grandmother's tools wrapped in cloth, and 19 years of knowing exactly what her hands were capable of. She slept the first night in the bus park, not by design. She had arrived late. It did not know the city, and the address on the paper took her 2 days of wrong buses and patient strangers to find. She ate little. She asked questions carefully. She did not panic because panic is a luxury, and Amara could not afford luxuries. On the second afternoon, she found the shop. It was called Ejanike, aka, which means roughly the market of handmade things, and it sat between a phone accessory store and a tailor's shop in a row of small businesses. On a busy Wall Street, the woman inside was somewhere between 40 and 50, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the particular efficiency of someone who does not waste movement. Her name was Bisi Adeyemi, and she was originally from Ogun State. And she had built this business over 12 years, from a table at a craft fair to a shop with an actual lease and 2 employees, and a growing list of buyers that included hotels, foreign embassies, and an interior design firm in London. Amara walked in, set her cloth bag on the counter, and unwrapped one piece, a medium water vessel with the geometric pattern she had been developing for 4 years, the one inspired by beetle wings and her grandmother's fabric PC. Adami looked at it. She picked it up, she turned it, she looked at the underside, she set it down and looked at Amara. "Where did you train?" "I didn't," Amara said. "I learned from my grandmother." "How old are you, Mina?" Then Busy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How many more pieces do you have?" And that was how it began. Not with a grand gesture, not with a speech, just a woman who had spent 12 years learning to recognize original work. Looking at one piece of clay and asking the right question, BC did not offer charity. This also matters. She offered a transaction space in her shop, on consignment 60% to Amara, 40% to the shop, and the understanding that if the work sold, they would talk about something more permanent. She gave Amara the address of a women's cooperative 2 streets away that offered temporary accommodation for female artisans new to the city. She wrote it on the back of a receipt. That was all. Amara walked out of that shop with her cloth bag and her tools, and the address written on a receipt, and for the first time since that Tuesday morning, when her mother sat on the edge of her mat, she felt like the floor under her feet was solid. The next 2 years were not easy. I will not tell you they were, because this story respects your intelligence. Amara worked. She produced pieces, brought them to Busy Shop, watched some sell quickly and some sit for weeks, and learned from both. She found that the pieces that sold fastest in Abuja were different from the pieces that had sold in Ugoma. City buyers wanted certain sizes, certain finishes. She adapted without losing what was hers. She kept the geometric patterns. She kept the quality her grandmother had insisted on, but she learned presentation. She learned pricing. She learned how to look a buyer in the eye and name a number without apologizing for it. She lived carefully. She spent almost nothing every naira beyond rent and food. Went back into materials and back into the tin. At the cooperative, she met women from different parts of Nigeria who had each arrived in Abuja, carrying their own version of a story that was similar in its essential shape. Women who had been pushed out of something, women who had walked away from something, women who were building something in the space they had made for themselves. They cooked together on weekends. They argued about politics and prices and fabric dye. They celebrated each other's small wins with the particular intensity of people who know that nobody else is watching. Ngozi wrote letters, long ones, the kind with information embedded inside ordinary sentences. For anyone who might read them before they arrived. Mama Chisom is well. Kelechi passed his exams. The compound is fine. Adaeze has grown taller than me now. And underneath all of it, the thing Ngozi never said directly, but that Amara could read perfectly. Come home when you are ready. We are here. Amara wrote back short letters. Working hard, learning new things, I think of you all. She never mentioned whether she was coming home because she did not yet know BC, who was not a woman who gave praise easily. Told Amara one afternoon in the shop's back room while they were doing inventory that she had contacted the London interior design firm about Amara's geometric series, that they had expressed interest in a larger order, that this was if Amara wanted to pursue it, and the beginning of something different. Amara set down the bowl she was counting. She said how large an order. BC told her the number. Amara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I cannot produce that volume alone. I know, BC said. That is why I'm telling you now, because you would need to think about whether you want to go to the next level and what that would require that night. Amara sat in her small room at the cooperative and she thought about her grandmother, about hands moving across wet clay in the early morning, about the way Mama Ingu used to say that clay does not become itself alone. It needs fire. It needs pressure. It needs hands that know what they are doing, about how she had always understood that to mean the work of pottery, but was only now understanding it might mean something else too. The work of building a life. She thought about the women in the cooperative, several of them skilled, several of them underemployed, several of them doing work far below what their hands were capable of, because the right person, it had not yet asked the right question. She thought about Oguma, about the girls there, who would grow up being told in the language of cracked compounds, and unpaid school fees, and chief imekas with envelopes that their value was determined by who was willing to pay for them. She wrote Ngozi a letter that night, the longest one yet. At the end of it, she asked a question she had not asked in 2 years. Is there land available near the village center? The kind that could hold a small workshop? Ngozi's reply came in 11 days. Yes. And also, we have been waiting. This is the part of the story where many people expect a triumphant return. The shining car, the village gathering, the people who mocked her standing with open mouths. And yes, that part came, but it did not come first. What came first was quieter and more important. Amara came back to Ugoma for the first time on a Tuesday. The same day of the week, her mother had sat on the edge of her mat. She came on a regular bus, not a hired car. She carried a bag and her tools. She walked from the bus stop through the village. In the early afternoon, greeting people who recognized her and people who didn't, she went to her mother's compound. Mama Chisom was in the kitchen when she heard the gate. She came out slowly, wiping her hands on a cloth, and when she saw who was standing in her compound, she stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the yard with her hands held against her sides and her face, doing things that faces do. When feelings are too large and too mixed for any single expression to contain them, Amara stood on the other side of the yard. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Mama Chisom said, her voice very quiet, "You are thin," Amara said. "I have been working hard." Another silence. A rooster somewhere wind in the pepper plants. Mama Chisom said, "Are you well?" Amara said, "I am well." Mama Chisom pressed her lips together. Her eyes were full. She said, Amara said, "Mama, I know," and that was all. Because sometimes 2 words hold everything that a longer conversation would only flatten. I know you were afraid. I know you thought you were helping. I know that love can be the name we give to the thing we do when we are too frightened to imagine a different way. I know she did not say she was not hurt. She was hurt. She did not say it did not matter, it mattered, but she had spent 2 years in a city that did not know her name, building something from the ground up with no help except her grandmother's tools and her own steady hands. And what she had discovered in that time was that she was not the kind of woman who would spend her life waiting for an apology. Before she could move forward, she moved forward. They ate together that evening, the whole family Kelechi, taller now, and quietly delighted to see her Adeze, who had indeed grown, and who climbed onto Amara's lap, as if no time had passed. Mama Chisom, who kept refilling Amara's plate and saying nothing, and watching her daughter with the specific attention of a woman who is memorizing something after the children slept. Amara told her mother what she was building: a pottery workshop, training for young women in traditional techniques, a partnership with Busy Shop in Abuja for market access. It's a production model that could grow if it worked. She spread papers on the table, numbers, drawings, plans written in her careful handwriting. Mama Chisom looked at all of it for a long time. Then she looked up at her daughter and she said in a voice completely unlike the voice that had once said, "You are making pots." She said, "You thought of all this yourself?" Amara said, "Yes, Mama." She's almost quiet. "Then how can I help now?" "The part you have been waiting for the workshop was built on land in Frit. Josie had helped identify near the village center on a cleared plot that had been unused for years. Amara funded it from her savings, and from the first advance from the London order, it was not large 4 walls. Good light from wide windows, a proper kiln that took most of the budget, and a long work table that 12 people could sit around at once. Words spread the way things spread in Ugoma, which is to say immediately and with embellishment. By the time the workshop was ready, 17 women had asked to learn. Amara took 10. They ranged from 16 to 34. Some had never touched clay. One had been making rough pots for years with no access to a proper kiln. One had hands so naturally expressive that Amara, watching her first lesson, thought of her grandmother. The London order was delivered on time to specification. 12 pieces of the geometric series, wrapped carefully and shipped through Bessie's network. The interior design firm sent a photograph of them installed in a client's living room in Notting Hill. Amara pinned the photograph to the wall of the workshop where everyone could see it. Those pots were made here. She told her students in Ugoma, by hands like yours. Chief Emeka Obi heard about the workshop. Eventually, he came once driving past slowly in his car, looking at the building with the expression of a man who had expected a different ending to a story, and is finding the actual ending difficult to process. He did not stop. He did not come back. Some stories end not with confrontation, but with a man driving slowly past the building he doesn't know how to categorize. And then continuing on his way, Mama Chisom began coming to the workshop on Tuesday mornings, not to learn pottery. To help, she organized, kept track of materials, managed the schedule, made tea. She was efficient and calm, and completely invested in everything her daughter was building. Gozi, who had spent 2 years keeping Amara's savings tin under her bed and writing letters and saying nothing to anyone who didn't need to know, became the person who managed the relationships with women in nearby villages who wanted to send daughters to train. She had a way of talking to mothers, a particular patience with the kind of fear that wears the clothes of practicality that Amara recognized and was grateful for. The workshop became, within its first year, something the village pointed to, something that brought visitors, something that young girls in Ugoma or grew up knowing existed, the kind of thing that changes the available imagination of a place, that makes certain conversations about what a woman is worth slightly harder to have without contradiction. Until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. The elders used to say this. And for a long time in Uguma, the stories were written by the men with the envelopes and the filling stations and the large voices in village meetings. But the story said certain things about what women were for and what their value was and how it was measured. Amara did not argue with those stories directly. She simply built something that made them look smaller. This is the mirror the story holds up, not the dramatic one where the humbled kneel and the victorious stand over them. But the quiet one where a woman looks at what she has built and recognizes in it the shape of everything that was almost taken from her and didn't get taken because she did not let it, and her grandmother's hand in her hands. Her own plans unfolded on a table in her mother's kitchen. The London photograph on the workshop wall, 17 women who asked to learn and 10 who were already learning. This is what the axe forgot when he struck the tree, that trees have roots, that the root does not feel the axe the way the surface does. That if you cut a tree and walk away believing you have ended something, you may return years later to find not a stump, but a forest. Amara is 31. Now, the workshop has trained over 60 women. 3 of them have started their own small businesses. Bisi's shop in Abuja still carries the geometric series alongside newer work from women trained at Ugoma. There is a waiting list for the training program. Mama Chisom no longer works in the kitchen of her cracked compound. She manages the workshop supply accounts. She does it without being asked. She does it with the specific seriousness of a woman who understands she's paying something back, not in guilt, but in presence. Rain does not fall on one roof alone. What Amara built did not stay on her roof. It ran off into the compound, into the village, into the hands of women who are now teaching their daughters that their value is not a number in an envelope, that their grandmother's knowledge is not just tradition, but currency, that the things their hands can do are theirs. And nobody, not even someone who loves them, has the right to sell them. This is not a story about a woman who defeated the people who hurt her. Those people are still there, living their various lives, doing their various accounting, with their various choices. Chief Emeka runs his filling stations. Mama Chisom makes tea in the workshop. On Tuesday mornings, the village is still the village. This is a story about what happens when a woman refuses to let the worst thing that almost happened to her become the definition of her story when she picks up her grandmother's tools and a tin of savings and a small piece of paper with an address on it and walks toward the bus in the early morning dark and builds something in the space she makes for herself. Before we finish, I want to ask you something and I want you to sit with it. Not answer quickly. When someone takes away your voice in the name of love, when the person who silences you is not a villain but a frightened mother with wet eyes and genuine care in her heart, what does that kind of harm cost? And when you have paid that cost and come through it and built something on the other side, what does it mean to forgive? Is it a feeling? Is it a decision? Is it something you do once or something you do every Tuesday morning when you watch a woman make tea in a workshop she almost made impossible? Tell me what you think, because I truly believe some of the wisest people watching this have an answer I haven't heard yet.